In the deep autumn of 1880, when the Montana wind already carried the promise of snow, Caleb Thorne sat by his campfire, his figure a blurred silhouette against the flickering coals. He was one of those who sought not gold, but peace, yet found only the endless echo of his own footsteps in the desolate grandeur of the Wild West. His cabin, standing alone at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, was his fortress, shielding him from a world full of loss and disappointment. Caleb, a former Army scout, had left behind the blood and chaos of the Civil War, seeking solitude where his only companions were a horse named Colt and a trusty rifle. His days flowed measuredly, hunting, checking traps, and rare trips to the nearest trading post for supplies. In his eyes, accustomed to the horizon, there was an eternal weariness. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of flame man soot, Caleb, returning from a hunt, heard them. Faint, desperate voices, unlike any sound of the wild. He frowned. People were a rarity in these parts, and those who were encountered most often brought problems. Through the sparse bushes, he saw them. 3 women, young, barely older than 20, knelt in the cold dust, their bodies thin and emaciated. Their garments, though traditional for the Apache, seemed torn and dirty, testifying to a long and dangerous journey. Caleb's heart, accustomed to iron and ice, suddenly constricted. In their eyes, there was no warrior pride, only a pure, undisguised compassion, begging for help. One of them, with long black hair, fell to her knees before him, her gaze fixed on his face. She raised her hands as if in supplication, and spoke words that made Caleb's blood run cold. "Take us with you. We will bear your children and obey you forever," she whispered in broken English, her voice full of despair. The other 2 women, repeating her gestures, joined the plea, their voices merging into a chorus that seemed an echo in the silent wilderness. Caleb froze. The shock of their words was deafening. He had expected anything, an attack, a plea for food, but not this. He, a man who had fled from all attachments, suddenly found himself before 3 women who were offering him their lives, their future, their freedom in exchange for salvation. This was not just an offer, it was a cry for help, so desperate that it could not be ignored. He looked at their weary faces, at the bruises and scrapes, at the fear frozen in their eyes, and understood. They were running from something so terrible that they were willing to give up everything for protection. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice muffled. The women exchanged glances. The one who spoke pointed to the east. "Soldiers. And others. They are hunting us. Our tribe. Destroyed." Her words were choppy, but the meaning was clear. A massacre. A pursuit. This was a story Caleb had heard more than once in these parts. The conflicts between settlers, the army, and the native peoples were brutal and uncompromising.
I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel, so you will help me in motivation to make such great stories for you, and I will see that you like them. Enjoy watching, everyone.
An intrigue began to form in his mind. What had made them run so far, so desperately? What were they hiding? And what did their promise mean? He knew that by taking them with him, he would doom himself to the dangers he had fled from for so long. His solitude would be destroyed, his peace disturbed, but he also knew that he couldn't just leave them to die in the cold desert. His conscience, which he had long forgotten, suddenly awoke. "All right," he finally said, his decision heavy but final. "Come with me. To the cabin." But no foolishness, and no promises. He helped them up. Their bodies were light, almost weightless. He noticed how one of them, with her hair in braids, clutched a small leather pouch tightly to her chest, as if there was something very valuable inside. This added another note of intrigue to this unusual encounter. The walk to the cabin was short. Caleb tried to stay alert, constantly looking over his shoulder. He knew that if their pursuers found their tracks, they wouldn't stop. Inside the cabin, the women looked around cautiously, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. Caleb quickly built a fire in the stove, and warmth began to slowly spread through the room. He offered them his meager food, dried meat, and plain tortillas. They ate hungrily but with dignity, not losing their inner majesty even in such a position. Caleb watched them. Their names, which they spoke later, sounded melodic: Willow, Kia, and Shy. Willow, the one who spoke, was the eldest. Her gaze was full of sadness, but also strength. Kia was the most silent, her eyes often turning to the door, as if she still expected a pursuit. Shia, the youngest, looked almost frightened, but her hand always found Willow's, and in that was her source of confidence. Caleb gave them blankets, and they huddled together by the fire, trying to find warmth and safety. He, meanwhile, remained seated by the wall, holding his rifle at the ready. Questions swirled in his mind. What did they need? What were they hiding? And what would tomorrow bring? He felt that his life, so measured and predictable, had changed forever. And this was just the beginning. The morning brought not only a cold wind but also anxiety. Caleb Thorne awoke before dawn, his instincts as a former scout screaming danger. The three women, Willow, Kia, and Shia, slept curled up by the hearth, their presence seeming unreal in his lonely cabin. But the leather pouch that Willow held so tightly to her chest suggested that this meeting was no accident. It was an intrigue, woven around something deeper than just an escape from pursuit. When the sun appeared over the horizon, Caleb, armed with his rifle, went outside. The tracks they had left yesterday were clear and led directly to his cabin. They were easy to find. He knew that the McKay brothers, notorious thugs, would not give up their prey without a fight. Their reputation was sinister. They didn't just pursue, they destroy. Stories of the atrocities they committed for their gold, countless treasures rumored to be hidden by the Indian tribes echoed throughout the area. Caleb knew that now he was caught up in it. Suddenly, horsemen burst out from behind a rock, four figures, dressed in tattered leather jackets and wide-brimmed hats. The McKay brothers, their faces were rough, their eyes cold and cruel. Their leader, a burly man named Ro McKay, rode in front. He dismounted, his gaze fixed on Caleb's cabin. "We know they're with you, old man," he bellowed, his voice creaky like an old cart. "Hand over our prey, and no one gets hurt." Caleb gripped his rifle. His heart, long accustomed to battle, beat steadily. But now something more than his own life was at stake. He glanced at the cabin where the women were hiding, and hatred boiled up in his soul. Hatred for these people who brought death and destruction, who despised other people's lives for their own greed. "Get out!" Caleb shouted. "There's no prey of yours here." He knew it was pointless. The McKays didn't back down. Ro McKay smirked, his eyes gleaming with cold fire. "Don't make it difficult, old man. We know they're from the Redstone tribe. They're hiding a map to a treasure." At that moment, Caleb understood. It wasn't just about revenge or hatred for the Indians. It was about the legend of a treasure. The intrigue that had started yesterday now took on a sinister form. Thoughts of his own chase for gold flashed in his mind. He knew how greed could blind a person. "They don't have any map," Caleb lied, knowing it was only a delay. "You've got the wrong address." Ro McKay gestured for his men to surround the cabin. Caleb realized that his chances were slim. He was 1 against 4, and inside were 3 unarmed women. He retreated to the cabin door, preparing for a last stand. But then the door opened, and Willow, Kia, and Shia came out of the cabin. Their faces were serious, but there was no panic in their eyes. Willow stepped forward. "We're coming with you," she said to Caleb, her voice firm, devoid of all fear. Her gaze was fixed on Ro McKay, and in it was an ancient hatred passed down from generation to generation. "Ah, here are our little hens," Ro growled, his eyes greedily scanning the women. So, the old man decided to play hero. Well, this is his last dance. He raised his rifle. At that moment, Caleb, driven not only by self-preservation, but also by a sudden burst of responsibility for these women, made a decision. He took a step forward, shielding them with his body. "They're with me, and you won't touch them." His voice was full of resolve. His eyes met Willow's, and in them he saw not just gratitude, but trust he hadn't felt in many years. A short, but tense conversation began between them in gestures and fragmented phrases. Willow, with incredible calm, took the very map out of her pouch. Caleb, despite all the anger that had overwhelmed him, was stunned. She was ready to show it. Ready to bargain. "The map," Willow said, holding it in her hands, "to the treasure. To the place of my people's spirits. We will show you the way. In return, you will leave us alone. And this man, too." Her words were bold, yet full of despair. Caleb felt pain for her people, for what they had been through. Ro McKay laughed. "Naive Indian girl. You think I'll believe your tales? You're just stalling for time." He took a step towards her, but Caleb raised his rifle. "Stop, or I'll blow your head off." Tension hung in the air, thick and palpable. Ro McKay thought it over. His greed battled with caution. If the map was real, it was worth the risk. He lowered his rifle. "All right, show me the way, Indian girl. The one wrong move, and your friends will learn what real pain is." His words were full of threat, but there was a note of curiosity in them. So began their dangerous journey. Caleb, 3 women, and 4 thugs. An unequal alliance, driven by greed and despair. Caleb knew this was only a respite. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new dangers. But now he had a purpose, far more important than gold. He had to protect these women, especially Willow, who carried not only the secret of the map but also hope for the future. He felt his solitude slowly dissipating, giving way to a new, unfamiliar responsibility. This was the beginning of their shared struggle. To journey deep into the wild lands was unbearably difficult. Caleb Thorne walked ahead, his gaze sharp, looking for ambushes and traps that could be set by both nature and man. Willow, Kia, and Shia followed behind him, their fragile figures barely discernible in the dawn mist. The McKay brothers, grim and suspicious, moved at a distance, their rifles at the ready. Ro McKay, their leader, never took his eyes off Willow, as if trying to read her mind. His greed and distrust were palpable in every step, and this created constant tension. Willow led them, guided by the map and ancient knowledge. She pointed out hidden springs, barely noticeable animal tracks that led through impassable gorges. Caleb watched her. Her ability to navigate these wild places, where there were no roads or paths, amazed him. She moved with a grace that seemed incompatible with the danger surrounding them. He saw how she would occasionally take out the leather pouch, from which a faint, herbal smell emanated, the smell of something ancient and sacred. The deeper they went into the mountains, the wilder and more inhospitable the terrain became. The rocks rose to the sky, sharp as the fangs of a predator, and deep canyons hid darkness and unknown dangers. The McKay brothers became increasingly impatient. "How much longer, Indian girl?" Roy growled, his voice echoing through the gorge. "Don't waste our time, or we'll make you talk differently." His words were full of threats, but Willow did not give in. She just compressed her lips and kept walking, her resolve stronger than steel. Caleb felt the tension growing. He understood that the McKays could erupt at any moment. His anger at them was a constant backdrop, but now he was focused on protection. He was their only hope. One day, as they were making their way through a narrow canyon, Willow stopped. Her eyes, widened with premonition, were fixed on an ancient, cracked drawing on the rock wall. It was a huge, stylized bear, its mouth open as if in a silent scream. "This is the entrance," she whispered. "The heart of the mountain. But something is wrong here." She turned to Caleb, her eyes full of worry. "This path, it has changed. The spirits are warning us." And then it happened. The ground under their feet trembled. A low rumble came from above, and huge boulders began to fall, blocking the passage. Shock ran through everyone. This was not a landslide caused by nature. It was a trap, ancient or created quite recently. "It's a setup." Roe McKay roared, his face distorted with fury. "Indian girl, you're leading us to our deaths." He pulled out his pistol and aimed it at Willow. His brothers also raised their weapons, their eyes burning with madness. "I didn't know anything," Willow shouted, her voice breaking into a scream. This is a warning." Caleb, acting instinctively, pushed Willow aside and fired. The bullet ricocheted off the rock next to Roy McKay, making him flinch. The shootout began instantly. Caleb covered Willow, Kia, and Shia, firing back at the brothers. Rocks fell. Dust rose in a column, the air filled with the smell of gunpowder and fear. The women screamed, their voices merging with the roar of gunfire. "Go!" Caleb shouted to the women while distracting the McKays. "Find a way out." He knew they couldn't last long. 1 against 4. And his ammunition was running out. At that moment, when it seemed all was lost, Willow, despite the panic, saw something on the map. There was another line, barely visible, that led to a small crevice, hidden behind a waterfall. "Here," she shouted, pointing at it. "There's another way." Caleb, under a hail of bullets, rushed to the crevice, covering the retreating women. He felt a burning in his hand. A McKay bullet had grazed him, but he paid no attention to the pain. His only goal was to protect them. He understood that this trap was deadly, but it also became the last test that was to finally reveal the truth about the map and the McKays' intentions. Their greed was not just a danger, it was the cause of this ambush, and this caused Caleb real shock. He knew that the treasure the McKays were looking for was only a lure. He managed to push the last of the women into the narrow crevice and, firing back, dived in after her. Immediately behind him, the last boulder fell, completely blocking the passage. They were trapped, or safe. Silence fell, broken only by Caleb's heavy breathing and the women's sobs. "We're alive," Willow whispered, pressing against him. "Because of you." But Caleb knew this was not the end yet. The McKay brothers were now enraged. They were locked out, but they were alive. And now they knew that the map was leading them not just to gold. It was leading them to a secret that could change everything. And at that moment, Caleb, feeling her trembling next to him, realized he was not just saving them, he had become a part of their destiny. And he was ready to accept it. He was ready for the final battle. Inside the cave, enveloped in a damp coolness and outer darkness, a tense silence reigned, broken only by Caleb's heavy breathing and the convulsive sobs of Kia and Shai. Willow, with surprising calmness, knelt beside Caleb. His hand was bleeding, but the wound was shallow, just a glancing bullet strike. The relief that the worst had been avoided was palpable, but danger still hung in the air. They were in a trap, or a sanctuary. "I can help," Willow whispered. Her hands, accustomed to herbs and healing, were already pulling dried leaves and powders from her leather pouch. "My tribe knows these herbs." Caleb, despite the pain, watched her. She quickly and skillfully treated his wound, applying a bandage. Her touch was gentle and confident, nothing like he expected from a person who had been fighting for her life a minute ago. This sparked in him a deep admiration for her resilience and knowledge. When the wound was bandaged, Willow took out her map. "We are almost at the goal," she said, her voice quiet but full of hope. "We are inside the heart of the mountain. The path ahead is only for the initiated, but now that you have protected us, you can see it too." They went deeper into the cave. Caleb, despite his wound, felt a surge of strength. Willow led them through narrow passages that led deeper and deeper. The air became cleaner, fresher, as if they were approaching some source of life. Their path was illuminated only by the meager light of Caleb's lamp, and sometimes a faint shimmer emanating from Willow herself, who seemed to glow with an inner power. Kia and Shia followed them, their fear gradually giving way to curiosity and admiration. Finally, they emerged into a huge cave, filled with an unearthly light. The light penetrated through a narrow crevice in the ceiling, creating ghostly columns of dust in the air. In the center of the cave, a spring flowed, pouring crystal clear water that collected in a shallow, transparent lake. Along the cave walls, there were stone niches in which ancient artifacts lay. Polished stones, feathers of exotic birds, old beads made of bones and shells, carved wooden figurines. This was a sacred place, the last refuge of Willow's ancestors, a place of their power and their peace. This was not gold, as the Mackays had assumed, but something much more valuable, a spiritual heritage, preserved for centuries. Willow, Kia, and Shai knelt at the spring, their eyes filled with tears of sorrow and relief. They had found their ancestors, their history. They washed their faces in the clear water, and at that moment, Caleb felt some invisible weight fall from his soul as well. The water in the spring was so pure that it seemed to wash away all the sorrows and fears that had accumulated over his long years of solitude. This was a place where time had stopped, and the past and present merged into one. They spent several days in this place, resting and recovering. Willow, surrounded by the spirits of her ancestors, seemed transformed. She became calmer. A spark appeared in her eyes, and a smile on her face that Caleb had only glimpsed before. She told him about her hopes, about her desire to revive her people, to preserve their culture, to pass on this knowledge to future generations. And the more she spoke, the more Caleb felt his own heart, long sealed by pain, begin to open. He watched her, so strong, so vulnerable, so full of life. And at the moment when he saw her looking at one of the ancient amulets, depicting a mother with a child, something shifted inside him. His own losses, his flight from attachments, all of it now seemed distant and insignificant. He had not just found a girl who needed to be saved. He had found meaning, a meaning that was much deeper than gold. On the 5th day of their stay in the heart of the mountain, when they were already feeling stronger, distant but persistent voices were heard from outside. The Mackay brothers, they had found another, less noticeable entrance, but had still discovered it. The shock of the realization that their pursuers were so close again pierced Caleb. However, now there was no fear, only cold determination. "We must stop them," Willow said, her gaze firm. "This is a sacred place. They must not defile it." Caleb nodded. He took his rifle. He knew this would be the final battle. When the Mackay brothers, dirty and exhausted, appeared in the passage, their eyes burned with the madness of greed. Ro Mackay, seeing the shimmering light from the spring, let out a triumphant cry. "There it is. Gold!" But a surprise awaited them. Caleb, standing at the entrance, fired, forcing them to retreat. Willow, Kia, and Shia, using their knowledge of the cave, began to drop rocks on them, knocking them off their feet and forcing them to hide. They were in their own world, and here they were strong. The Mackays, accustomed to open battles, were disoriented in the labyrinth of the cave. They couldn't see their opponents, but they felt their presence. One by one they fell, struck down by Caleb's accurate shots or by rocks falling from above. Finally, only Ro Mackay remained. His face was covered in dust and blood, his eyes full of frenzy. He lunged forward, but Caleb met him. A short but brutal fight. And when Ro Mackay fell, his gaze was full not of hatred, but of incomprehension. He never understood that he had lost not gold, but a battle with a force that was older and wiser than his greed. Finally, a complete silence fell in the cave. Only the shimmering of the spring lit their faces. This was not just relief, it was a triumph. They had won. After some time, they emerged from the mountain. The world seemed different. The air was cleaner, the sun brighter. The Mackay brothers were nowhere to be seen. Their fate remained unknown, but their disappearance was a gift. Caleb and Willow, holding hands, stood on a cliff, looking at the expanses of Montana. Before them stretched not just a wild land, but their new future. One day, as they sat by the spring, Caleb took her hand. "Willow," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "this place, it changed me. You changed me. I no longer want to be a lonely prospector who is running from the past." He looked into her eyes. I want to be a part of your future. If you will let me, I want to be the father of your child, Willow. We can build a new home here, where your ancestors will watch over us. We can revive what was lost. Together, Willow looked at him, and in her eyes was reflected not only love, but deep admiration. She saw how this harsh man, who once wanted nothing to do with other people's problems, was now ready to give everything for them. She nodded, squeezing his hand. Yes, Caleb. Together, and Kia, and Shia. They are our family too. Caleb smiled. His heart was filled with a new, unfamiliar warmth. Together with Kia and Shia, they began to build a new life at the foot of the heart of the mountain. Caleb's cabin expanded, turning into a cozy home. They revived traditions, passed on knowledge, and with each passing day, their small community grew. Years later, when their children, of mixed blood, ran along the same trails as their ancestors, the story of Caleb and Willow became a legend of the Wild West. A legend about how 3 Apache women found not just protection, but a true family and love in the heart of a lonely cowboy, and how an ancient map led to the revival of not only life, but also a soul. This was just the beginning of their own shared path to a future full of peace and hope.